Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Drabinski here with Ideas on Fire today for our webinar on how to move to a new city again and settle in. And we thought it'd be a good idea to do this webinar here in July because a lot of us are moving yet again often to jobs that are not permanent. So we know we're going to have to do it again. I have moved so many times and have learned really well how to settle in and make a place feel like home. Because even if you're only going to be there for a year or two, it feels better to feel like you live there than like you're just visiting. So the way this webinar will work is in a second, I will disappear from the screen along with my gorgeous wall. Isn't that gorgeous? And bring up the slides, and then we'll go through the webinar, which is will take about 30 to 40 minutes. And then I'll come back if you have questions while the webinar is going, or you have concerns or ideas. Most of you have probably also moved a bunch of times. Please go ahead and type them in this box over that's on this side of the screen, and we can discuss them as a group when I return. All right, so with that, bye-bye, and I will see you shortly. All right, so again, today's webinar is called How to Move to a New City Again and Settle In. I have moved I'm from Boise, Idaho. I moved to New York for college, Paris for work, DC, back to New York, Berkeley, Oakland, Hartford, Connecticut, back to Boise, Portland, Oregon, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Baltimore, Maryland, where I live now. So a lot of moves across the country in not that many years. So I'm excited to talk about this very stressful process today. So what's on tap is first we're going to talk about why we have to move and why it's hard. And this is the part of the webinar where we will commiserate over how much it sucks to move. We'll spend a little time today talking about how to decide how to move, like how to find a moving company and how to get your stuff where it needs to go. We have a webinar we did a couple of years ago that I'll link to at the end of this webinar that goes into more detail about sort of how to actually physically pack and logistically move. But we'll talk about that a little bit today. Then I wanted to discuss how to find housing. This is the hardest thing. Then how to find friends in your new town. It's really great to be able to make friends who aren't just your immediate colleagues because that has its own challenges in politics. So we'll talk about how to find friends other places. Then some of the stuff that makes a place feel like home, things like having a doctor and a dentist, things that come if you get health insurance with your job, gyms, grocery stores, stuff like that. And then I wanted to end on a positive note about the fun of exploring your new city. So we'll talk a bit about that today as well. All right, why do we move? Most of us are moving as academics, are moving for our career. We take whatever job they want. People ask me how I ended up in Baltimore. I love Baltimore. It's a great city. And people will say, what made you decide to move here? And I tell them the truth, which is that it's the only job that I got after 6 years of trying to find a job with some security. So that's why I live here. And that's probably why a lot of you are moving right now as well. You move where the money is. But you also, might be moving for family reasons because your spouse, partner, people you care about have to move for something. So you might have to move for that reason, or you might just move because that's what life is calling you to do. But for most of us, we're moving for our career. And it's really, really challenging. It's one of the top 3 stressors that one can go through in life. That's what all the scuttlebutt about it on the web is, that getting a new job and having a baby. But moving is always really, really challenging. And it's hard physically, like just the sheer act of like packing your stuff, moving, unpacking. It's a very tense, and it can be a very tense and difficult project. Also, those weeks leading to the move and after the move are some of the hardest times to find ways to feed yourself in a nourishing way, to find time to practice the self-care practices we engage in, be that exercise or yoga or meditation or whatever. It's often hard to take care of ourselves. Monetarily, it is such a mess. And if you are lucky enough to be moving for a job where you get reimbursed, you have to get reimbursed, which means you've got to figure out how to come up with a lot of money up front. And that adds its own stress that can have physical effects. So we'll talk a little bit about how to save some money in the moving process. And then emotionally, it's really hard. Leaving a place that we've lived for a long time, or even if it's a short time. I had a postdoc in New Orleans for 4 years, which no longer seems like a long time, but because it was as long as I'd been anywhere since I left Boise, Idaho to go to college, it felt like home. And it was emotionally incredibly challenging to leave a place where I felt like myself and had a community. So never give short shrift to the emotional difficulties of leaving a place that feels like home. Someplace, I know when I left graduate school, I was excited to leave because that was hard. So sometimes it can be a great thing, but a lot of times it's really emotionally challenging to move. So just want to start by saying, yes, let's commiserate about that. This is really, really hard. And when you get to that point of moving and packing where you want to light the whole apartment on fire, that's when you know you're really getting ready to move. You're almost there. So I want to start by talking about the logistics of moving. I've moved lots of times, and I've moved in pretty much any way that you can imagine. And there are a few decisions that you want to make when you're deciding what and how much to move. First, you got to make that decision about everything in your life, whether to sell it or move it. If you have a bunch of cheap furniture from IKEA that you have to take apart, it can be very hard to put that stuff back together in a way that it holds. So that's the kind of furniture you might think about selling, or more likely giving away. It's hard to sell used upholstered furniture, especially if you live in a city, for lots of good reasons. But you'll have to make this decision about pretty much everything in your home. You can also make the choice to store it if you feel like you're going to be back, if this really is just a 1-year move and you know you're returning to a place. Storage is an option, albeit not an inexpensive one. If you do decide to sell, keep in mind that there are costs to selling. It takes a lot of time, and if you're using Craigslist or an app or selling on Facebook Marketplace or something like that, you're gonna have to deal with a lot of people saying they want to buy your stuff and then not showing up. It's really a lot of work. So factor that in when you're making the decision about whether or not it's cheaper to move it or to get rid of it and buy something new on the other side. That said, I've made the mistake in more than one move of selling things or of throwing away things that I could have easily moved, but then I have to buy again on the other side. And the purchases that you have to make when you first move into a new place, especially in a new city, there's just so many of them. So be mindful about what might save you cash in the end. Like the amount of money you spend in that first week in a new place, buying new cleaning supplies, things to hang pictures, furniture if you got rid of things, the extra fees to set up cake. I mean, it just really adds up. So these are hard decisions, but it's best to make them at the packing end and not the unpacking end, right? Because it's a lot of work to move things. One thing that for academics is really challenging is moving our libraries. That's a ton of work, and I'll talk in a second about some options for that. Then you need to decide if you want full service movers who are going to come and pack everything, or if you want movers where you pack everything and they drive it where you're going. Or if you want to pack everything and drive it yourself. These are kind of the three main moving options. I have never used a full service moving company because it's always been out of my price range. It looks amazing. And if I have to move again, maybe I'll try it out. But if you've got the kind of budget that can handle it, this is a way to sort of ease a lot of the stress and pressure. Also, movers are, they're trained professionals. They're just better at this than we are, no matter how many times we move. So if you can swing it, that can be a great option. But chances are you can't. One option that's good. And a lot of people don't want somebody else touching their stuff to pack it. They want to pack it themselves. And if that's something you want to do, you can do all the packing, but get a moving company that will bring it out of your house, put it in their truck, drive it to your new home, and put it back in your new house, right? So that's another option. Either of these require a moving company, and moving companies are notoriously difficult to trust. So my advice here is to contact your a point of contact person at the university you're moving to find out if they have university approved movers. They sometimes will have lists of moving companies that have worked for them. If you're leaving graduate school, asking people who moved a year or two before you for their tips, that sort of word of mouth thing, I think, is the best way to find reliable companies. The internet is very unreliable when it comes to reviews for moving companies. So word of mouth, I think, is the best way to do it. There's also the option of packing up your stuff and driving it yourself. And this is a great option if you've got the time and you don't mind driving a giant truck around. They do, I will tell you, also have enormous mirrors. So that's pretty great. So you will be able to drive it even if it feels like you maybe can't. So in terms of the U-Pack U-Drive option, another tip is to buy the smallest truck you need, because your stuff is safest if it's packed tightly so it doesn't move around a lot. So U-Haul, Penske, and Budget are the big truck rental places. Look and make sure that if you use a credit card to book it, that the insurance covers it, or if your car insurance covers the rental truck. These are just some things to keep in mind if you choose that option, but it can be a really good option, especially if you have to move a car as well. You can hitch it to the back of that truck and drive it. So that's another option. So another option that's not doesn't involve a moving company is to ship your stuff and then get yourself where you're going. And this works only if you are getting rid of all of your furniture, because it's really expensive to ship like a bookcase. But if you're going to get rid of all that stuff, and if you're just coming out of grad school and you think you're going somewhere where you might be for a while, this can be a good option. And this is, I think, the best option for books, is to ship using USPS. USPS book rate is very inexpensive, so that can be a good way to save some cash no matter what shipping option you choose, and let somebody else carry your books away. If you go the USPS route, be sure to box your books well. One move, I thought I would save some money by just wrapping my books in brown paper grocery bags and shipping them that way. And I lost a lot of books that way. So don't make that mistake. But USPS is a great option for shipping your stuff. Amtrak is another option. They have freight services, so you could contact them and see if that is an affordable option. And then UPS and FedEx are other options. My move to Baltimore, I did almost completely with UPS because they would pick up. So I packed everything in boxes, and all those boxes were in my office because I'd been my apartment had been sold just a couple months before I left. So I put everything in my office, and then I just arranged for UPS to come pick it all up. And then they brought it all to my house. And that might seem wild. I think I had 60 boxes, but you know what? You pay them, they move it. They even helped carry all that stuff up the stairs at my new place in Baltimore. So UPS and FedEx are pricier than USPS, but can also be a good option. And then finally, you've got to think about how you're going to move your cars, your pets, and other people. If you're moving a car, you can hire somebody to drive it. You can hire a moving company to move it, or you can drive it yourself, which has always seemed like the easiest option to me. And if you have pets and other people you're moving, that can be a fun road trip. Then again, you might have two cats who scream for 72 hours on their way from New Orleans to Baltimore. But, it's that part will end. If you do decide to drive and you're moving pets, be sure to check for hotels along the way that accept pets. La Quinta Inns accept pets. So that is how I have done most of my moves since I got my cats. Anyway, there's a lot more we could talk about here about the logistics of actually doing the move. And at the end of the webinar, there's a link to another webinar that goes into more depth about that. But I'm happy to answer any questions about these options. I have used every single one other than the full service movers. All right, let's talk about what happens, like where you're going to live when you get to your new place. Because you can't really book a moving company until you know where, well, you can, but you want to know where the stuff's going. You need an address. So if you want to do this before you move, here's some pieces of advice. One, networking really works. Ask the people in your new department if anybody's on sabbatical. That can often be a good way to just slide into somebody else's home for a year and give yourself time to figure out where you want to live. A lot of campuses, if they're bigger, have housing listservs to help people find housing close to the university or the college. So that's also helpful. Social media, I think, is really, really powerful here. If you have a Facebook friend or a Twitter friend who lives in the place you're moving to, just having them post on their Facebook, like, hey, anybody know of a place, is often a good place, a good way to find an apartment. Like I found my first apartment in Baltimore, somebody I briefly dated, her best friend's girlfriend lived here. So if you've got a lesbian mafia, that is also a great tip. I think that finding housing before you move can be really scary because can you really choose a place to live sight unseen? And I've done this. I've chosen places sight unseen and had pretty good luck with it. One thing you can do is send a new colleague or somebody you know who lives in the town to look at a place for you. If it's going to be a temporary sublet or something, if you are working with somebody you trust, if it's a sabbatical leave, for example, you can take that risk. It is a little bit scary though. If you don't know anything about the place you're moving. So if you can, make an extra visit to find an apartment, if you can. So this is, for a lot of us, an expense that we really can't afford. It's something worth asking about if you get a new job, to see if they might have a way to help subsidize a house hunting trip. Chances are they can't, but if you can swing it, it can be great to visit the town and see some apartments and try to pick one yourselves that way. But don't panic if you can't. A lot of us can't afford that. I was never able to do that. Everywhere I've moved, it's been sight unseen. So if that's the case, so whether that's the case, you're going to choose a place sight unseen or you're going to make a house hunting trip. Plan ahead, and that means choosing neighborhoods that you want to focus your search in and making appointments with landlords or rental agencies. And depending on the city, it might be the kind of city where you get an agent. And if that's the case, the agent will do a lot of that legwork for you. When you're choosing neighborhoods, I'd be wary about, how do I want to say this? So when I was choosing neighborhoods in Baltimore, Baltimore has a reputation for being a city with a lot of violence. And so at first people only recommended a couple of neighborhoods. And now that I live here, I can see why they recommended those neighborhoods. And also there are a lot of other neighborhoods that are awesome to live in. So just ask multiple people, because people have their own biases about what counts as a neighborhood you'd want to live in. It'd be really helpful to have your own list of priorities. So for me, the biggest priority is to be able to walk to a grocery store. And that cut a lot of neighborhoods in Baltimore just right out of my list. If you're going to have a commute, finding neighborhoods that have good access to those commuter routes also really important. If you're not going to have a car, finding routes that are near transit, really important. So so rather than choose your focus on neighborhoods based on what a few people's biases might say, keep in mind what matters to you about a neighborhood. I want walkable, close to public transit, and so that's what I have. And then finally, have a backup plan if you don't find something on that house hunting visit, because that can happen a lot. And that doesn't mean your trip is a failure. It just means that you didn't find a place. But what you did do on that trip is see your new city or town and get a sense of where you want to live and what the rental housing can look like. So, but have a backup plan if there's somebody you can stay with, or do you need to have your stuff delivered to a storage unit? If you use one of those cube things to move, UPS or U-Haul uses them, ABF Pack uses them. Those you can sometimes pay to have stored on site when they arrive for an indeterminate amount of time. So just think about backup plans in case the worst thing happens, which is that you don't have a place lined up before you move. But I will say that has never happened to me in all of my many, many moves. So Godspeed, we can do this. All right, once you get here, how do you go about finding friends? It might seem a little silly to talk about this, but finding friends is how you make a place feel like home, and it's also how you help yourself take care of yourself. So the usual instruction to new faculty members is to say no. Say no to everything, because you need to focus on your research and writing. When it comes to finding friends and actually making a place feel like your home, I think it's actually important to say yes to lots of things, even things that you think you're not really interested in doing. Saying yes to new faculty stuff, new faculty orientation. They'll have a lot of events. Going to them, I think, is a good way to meet faculty outside of your department and can help you build a cohort of new folks. And if you are moving for a temporary position, like a postdoc or a visiting assistant professor position, or something that you know is temporary, it's worth asking what new faculty orientation events are relevant to you and going anyway, because that's how you'll meet the other postdocs and the other visitors, and finding people who are in a similar situation is really important and helpful. If you use social networking, now's the time to use it. When I was moving to Baltimore, someone my sister worked with at Out Magazine in the mid-1990s, went to grad school with a guy who lived in Baltimore, and she set us up via Facebook, and I just said yes, because you just say yes to these things when you first move to a new place. And it was really, and that friendship has been really important and was a gateway into a lot of things in my new city that were important. So using social networks and saying yes to those like friend setups can be really helpful. Another suggestion I have is to think about what your hobbies are and engage them and find other people who are doing them. So, for example, I ride a bike around. That's my main form of transportation, and I'm really passionate about bicycles. And so when I move into a new town, one of the first things I do is use the internet to find the local group rides and see if there's, so in Baltimore, it didn't take long to discover that on Wednesday nights there's a women and femme bike ride, and I just said yes, and I went to it, and I met people that way. If you are really into yoga, or you're a yoga instructor, like find the studios in your new neighborhood and start going to them. This sounds like common sense, but it took me a couple moves to figure out that this was the way, that just doing what I love to do was a way to find friends who I'd have something in common with, right? I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out. But you might be thinking, I don't have any hobbies because all I do is research and write, and so this isn't going to work. I know this sounds wild given how much you have to do in a new position, but sometimes finding a new hobby or taking up a new hobby can be a way to sort of broaden your social circle and find new things to do and people to see. So you might want to take up a new hobby. I recommend biking. It's really fun and it's a cheap way to get around. Another tip is to find political spaces. A lot of us were doing organizing in the place we lived before we moved, and chances are the place we're moving to has activist organizing around similar issues. So, for example, I was pretty active in anti-prison organizing in New Orleans, and when I got to Baltimore, it didn't take long to find people who were organizing against mass incarceration in Baltimore and Maryland, because that's it's a common issue in a lot of places. And those political spaces they really feed you, and they really can feel like they make a place that you care about and that you live. So if you have the time and energy, finding those political spaces can help connect you to the place and also to people who care about similar things. And that organizing is a way of really organizing is really important for lots of reasons. And on this totally personal level, it's really important as a way of feeling like you're invested in where you live. And that investment, even if it's only for a year or two, really pays off, I think, in helping us learn new things and also help us feel at home. Another tip is to find identity-based spaces. No matter what city I'm in, I find the gay bookstore, bar, community center, wherever it is. And I might not hang out there a lot, but it's a good sort of starting point for meeting people who you might have something in common with. And then I just wanted to end this part of our discussion by reminding us to say yes again, like say yes to things, even if you don't have time, because you have time to say yes to something. And so it might be, I'm going to say yes to 2 things a month, right? Or 2 things a week, sort of depending on where you're at. But say yes. That's how you find people you have something in common with, who aren't just the people you met on the first day of faculty orientation. All right, let's talk a little bit about the fun of finding all of these things. To me, one of the most frustrating things of being new in a place is having to Google map my way everywhere. It's annoying. I just want to know where I'm going. You figure that stuff out pretty quickly. No matter where you live, you've got your grocery store, the coffee shop where you're going to work, and if you're the kind of person who likes a bar, you'll find your neighborhood bar. You'll find those things fairly quickly. But I just want to talk a little bit about some tips about finding these resources in your new town. First, pay attention at that HR intro session. It is really easy to ignore all that stuff, but what your health insurance plan covers and who you can go see is really important information. So get that information, talk to colleagues at your new institution and ask them, because chances are you'll have a choice of health plans and things like that. So ask folks what they use and where they go to help find and make those connections. Another tip I have is to do all the free weeks at all the gyms. And this might be very personal, but I really like trying new things with my body. And when I move to, even if I'm just visiting a place for very long, I like to see what are the offerings. And that can be a good way to get yourself out of the house and meeting new people. And you might find a place where you really click and you want to be there. So that's another tip. Another is to find the local co-op or organic grocery store. These are great places to shop, but also great places to meet people. Here in Baltimore, we're lucky enough to have an anarchist co-op, bike shop, and bookstore and cafe. A lot of towns will have a spot like that, and that can be a great place to find like-minded people. Also, social networking can really help finding these getting these basic needs met, and it also lets people know that you're in the business of making yourself at home. So use the Yelps and explore your new city. Also, be patient. It just takes a while to really settle into a place. Some places can feel like home right away. New Orleans did in about 10 days. Baltimore took 2 years. You just got to be patient, let things unfold, and let yourself order in sometimes. It's really taxing to always have to be um, finding, you can't just go to the grocery store, you got to Google it. That can be really draining. So grant yourself some grace to order in, to let yourself be cared for when you're able to. And then finally, I want to talk about the exciting things of moving to a new city. I've now lived in Baltimore for 8 years, which is twice as long as I've lived anywhere. And this time of year, I watch in my social networks as lots of friends do the cross-country shuffle to new gigs. And while I'm happy I don't have to pack and move, I get a little jealous because living in a new city is really exciting. Because there's so much to learn about a new place. So here's some tips for exploring your new city. First, take weekends off. And we did a webinar on this a few months ago, and I'll link to it in the next slide. But figure out how to organize your work schedule so you've got time to go explore and do things. Be a joiner. And this is easy for me to say because I think I'm a natural born joiner. But it's worth stepping out of your comfort zone and joining some things because it's a way to meet people and also get to know what's going on in your town. So here's some ideas. Intramural sports. I have a new colleague who joined an intramural basketball team, and she didn't stick with it because those weren't her people, but it got her out playing basketball and exploring new areas of the city, and it was great. Organizing roundtables are, again, a really great way to find out what's the context of your new city, right? As newcomers, we've got a lot to learn, so those can be good places to listen and learn about your new place. And again, depends on your hobbies. Is there a knitting circle, a book club, theater, music, art? One thing that I did in New Orleans, because I was making a very measly amount of money as a postdoc there, is I started working as an usher at the local theaters. And that meant I got to see plays and got to get out of my house on a Thursday night. And that was a really good idea. So if there's something that can get you out of your house, I think that can often help you feel more like you live in a place. Also, and this isn't listed on the slide, but one thing that I've done in places I've lived is pick up a couple of history books about the city I'm living in so that I can get a sense of why it looks the way it does. Because as we all know, cities are the result of choices and politics and struggle, and that is a really exciting thing to learn about whatever new place you're in, and can give you an interesting take on how to make it feel at home. If you're into sports, following the local sports team before you move to the place can also help you start to form a kind of emotional bond. When I got the job in Baltimore, I don't even really like baseball, but I got MLB TV for the summer so that I could watch some Orioles games and get into it. So whatever it is that you like to do where you are now, prepare to do that in your new city, and that's how you explore it. Also, do things outside of campus life. I think that often when we're working in universities and colleges, that can become our whole world. And as graduate students, it definitely often is. It's like a lot of our world. So if that's you, that's great. And it's worth thinking about branching out and doing things outside of the university so that you have a sense of yourself as not just a worker, right? And when it gets really hard, and it will, and it does, remind yourself of the adventure. Like, you get to live in a new place and explore all these new things, and it's actually really, really exciting. So that's something I remind myself often when I'm in a new place. Is what a gift it is to get to have the time to explore a brand new city. All right, so that's our webinar. But I wanted to, and you'll get. These slides are linked in the Crowdcast, and you also get them in email. But we've got a couple of other resources from Idea on Fire that can be helpful here. First is the webinar I was talking about before, the nitty-gritty of moving and how to deal with the logistics. We also have a webinar that will help you learn how to take weekends off and resist that culture of busyness that I think starts getting formed at that first new faculty orientation, where everyone talks about how much work they have to do and tenure and job market, whatever it is. But learning how to protect your weekends so that you can engage in your new city is an important way of feeling at home there. And then we also have one of the things that's hardest about moving is figuring out how to maintain old friendships and also make new ones, especially when we're so busy with our jobs. Making friends as adults is not always the easiest thing. So I have a link here to a blog post at Ideas on Fire about how to nurture friendships intentionally, no matter how busy things get, which I think might be very helpful. All right, so I'm going to now return to the screen. Hello. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm back. All right, so I'm looking at, yes, Penske, much cheaper than U-Haul. Amber, I'm totally on board with you on that. Pods, yes. Amber, also a good one. Oh, success with apps like Meetup. That's a great idea. And I haven't actually used Meetup, but my current partner used it a lot when she moved here and got her heart broken. And she used it to find other people who were interested in music. If you're single, this is how I got to know Baltimore pretty well. If you're single and in the mood for online dating, that can be a really good way to meet people and make friends. And, maybe find something a little bit more. But I think a lot of what helped me feel at home in Baltimore was dating somebody in Baltimore. And it wasn't a great relationship, but I met a lot of people and made a lot of friends. Does anyone else have any ideas of, or because a lot of you, I'm sure, have experience moving? It sucks. It totally does. I will say that moving is one of those things that feels really terrible, and then once it's done, you kind of forget about it, and you just sort of move on. Yeah. Oh, yes, Amber. How did you move those two cats? Did you fly with them or drive? How far did you have to drive them? Oof. That's a great idea. When I moved my two cats from New Orleans to Baltimore, I drugged them because that was the advice that I got. And for my cats, it just made their yowling sound weirder. But I do think that a lot of cats, that's really helpful. So Gail, one thing you might try is getting a prescription from your vet and try it out on your cats before you drive them, because you can see how they react to it. Oh, Amber, you're so good to your cats. Yeah. That's so sweet. Also, they might freak out, but they're also going to be okay because they're cats and they adjust. Yeah. Amber, you're very lucky that yours calmed down after a few hours. Mine did not calm down. Well, one of mine did not calm down for 3 full days of travel. But you know what? She's fine now. Yeah. Oh, that's such a good idea on the window screens. All right. Any other tips or questions as you figure out how to move? All right. Well, what about relocation allowances? Gail, did you were you offered one? And is it reimbursement, or are they giving you money up front? Yeah, it's probably a reimbursement. I think that's really helpful and great. Be prepared, of course, for the reimbursement to take. At my university, it takes at least 6 weeks to get your reimbursement, but the relocation allowance will I think uh, gives you some wiggle room, and definitely you want to make sure you spend it all. Supporting a partner going through the same thing from a distance. Oh, that is such hard work, and I've had to do that a couple of times myself. If anyone has tips, please to type them in the box. I think that it's the same way you support a partner through anything, with a lot of listening and commiseration. I think, yeah, that two-body problem is the worst. I remember moving to Portland with my partner, and then I got a job in New Orleans, and she's like, "Are you just going to leave?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't know what to do." It's really, really hard. But I think being really open and honest about those difficulties is helpful. And then planning. One thing that helped us was to have a plan for when we would get to see each other, laid out pretty far in advance on the calendar. That was really helpful. I'm trying to think of what else works. Sometimes treating your partner like having food delivered to them, or helping them find things to do in their new town. Just feeling, and sort of emphasizing the excitement of both of you getting to explore a new place. These are things, but it just is hard. Ugh, it's just really hard. But it's worth it, and you get some new jobs. You get to find a new place. But yeah, I think helping, that's one of the hardest things to do. Yeah, people outside of academia that do not understand. They just think, well, why don't you just get a job where your partner teaches? Well, it doesn't really work like that. I'm now dating somebody who's not an academic, and it has made some things a little bit easier. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Wendy. Oh, good point. I hate that. Thank you, Wendy, for that reminder. Yeah. And like, my only advice for the taxable income part is when you get the reimbursement to sock away some of it in a secret savings account labeled taxes, so that you're not shocked by a tax bill the next year. And that, it just, and it takes a lot of, what would I call it? Self-control to just save that money. But that's what I do when I get reimbursements is save it. Yeah. Do you have to change your residency? Oh, if you're moving for a temporary position, do you mean when you're filing taxes? Because if it's for tax purposes, you'll have to file part-year tax returns for both states. Most people I know don't change their car registration unless it's up. I always like to register to vote wherever I live because I like voting. But you can also choose to vote absentee ballot in your old place. So a lot of these are choices. Taxes, you will just have to do both of. You'll just have to do both of those forms. And yeah, taxes have gotten way more complicated. Pet registration. I've never registered a pet, so I actually don't know. My cats just live in my house and they don't have anything. And a lot of these like moving registration taxes, things like that, registering to vote, they are chores. Oh, wow. Gail, what state are you in? They charge taxes for pets? Okay. All right, North Carolina. But you don't get to claim them as dependents, I'm guessing. Some of these like mundane tasks give you something to write, Amber. Some of these give you something to do when you get to your new town. Like, nobody wants to go to the DMV, but if you decide you do want to change your registration, and this is something, check with your check with your car insurance company to see if they, try to do it on the down low to see. If you move to a city with way higher insurance rates, that can be a real sticker shock. Yeah, same, Amber. My car insurance moving from Portland, Oregon to New Orleans, Louisiana, the year after Katrina and the levees broke. Whew, yeah, that was a lot. So, but these tasks, if you do have to do them, they are sometimes ways of getting to know where you live, like going to the cable store to like get a cable box or something. It's like such a drag, but when you're new at a place, at least it gets you out of your house. And you've got to figure out where that place is and you see a new part of the city. So those tasks are a drag, but they can also be a part of like getting to know your new bureaucracy, which is part of where you are. Most people I know don't change their car insurance if they're going to be gone just temporarily. Yeah. Gail, where are you moving to? I'm just curious. All right. Kentucky, that's exciting. I've never been to Berea, but I bet it's beautiful. If you're an outdoorsy type person, like finding where the local hiking trails is a great way to get out of your house. I collect national parks passport cancellation stamps, so that's another thing that I always, if I have to move to a new place, see what national parks are around and plan those trips. Yeah, those tiny towns I think have there's like a different way of making yourself at home, just because your social world is smaller. Yeah. Prepare for culture shock indeed. Well, it's, oh, yeah. Yeah, I hear that. Are there like organizing groups or they're like, yeah. Is there, do you know if there are any sort of groups for women of color, like organizing groups? Yes, of course, you're networking for all of that. I think that's those kind of identity-based groups can be a place where you'll find some like-minded folks. How far away are you from? Is Berea from a bigger? Okay, yep, in Lexington, about 40 minutes away. Yeah, so that's not bad. Um, Lexington is totally cute and fun, and Lexington's not very far from Cincinnati, which is another like really big, actually pretty big city, and some great museums in Cincinnati. Well, thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Amber and Gail and Wendy, for your comments. And good luck with your moves this summer. And someday you won't have to move again, and that's very exciting too. All right, so have a good day, y'all, and thanks again, and good luck.